Hello everyone. Welcome to everyone who's coming on. Welcome to all my replay viewers. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you're catching me on YouTube, welcome. This was originally aired on Periscope, and I am replaying this, uploading the videos every day. Thanks for coming on. I will flip my camera around and talk with you guys. Hello everyone. Look, I forgot about my fan, so let me cut that off. If this is your first time with me, welcome. My name is Keely. I'm the owner of LoveHopeAdventure.com. I blog about the marriage relationship, intimacy in marriage, and how you can go deeper with your spouse. At the start of the scope, I was actually showing you my latest bedroom game. Okay? Oh, that's upside down. And I will be releasing this. This is the anniversary edition of the card suits that I have been putting out. So I'm going to release this here in another, pretty soon probably. You know, really, I've been meaning to release it for several months, but it is an anniversary edition. And so because I've procrastinated, I'm going to release it in honor of my anniversary, which is in June. So I'll release it soon. So anyway, this is the printable. And if you are on my spicy list, you will get access to that printable first. I'll send that PDF out here pretty soon, and then I'll write blog posts about it and pictures and everything else. So, anyways, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome. If this is your first time, I'm glad you're here with me today. I'm going to be talking about, you know, a private topic, like I do most times, right? I talk about a lot of private stuff, a lot of things that are kind of hard to talk about. And I think sometimes people, maybe we don't want to talk about this stuff because it's embarrassing, or we don't really know, I don't know, maybe we don't know what to say. So I titled the scope, Is Solo Sex Okay in Marriage? And the reason why I said solo sex instead of just masturbation is because I really want to have a distinction here, because there is a huge distinction between solo sex and masturbation. And while solo sex is masturbating, it's different. It's different because there's nothing wrong with stimulating yourself sexually with your spouse. And there are a lot of couples out there that will use mutual masturbation with each other so that they can enjoy their time together. Maybe they do this because physically having sex is kind of difficult. Maybe they're doing this as just a way to kind of spice things up. But solo sex is different. And this is really being pushed, particularly for women, okay? I don't know if you watch a lot of, not watch, but listen to a lot of radio. But there's a lot of songs out about women loving themselves. And by loving themselves, they mean masturbating. And this means, so there's a song out, I forget who sings it. Eventually it'll come to my mind who sings this song. But basically the song is talking about how the girl just doesn't need a man to please her. She can please her own self. She can take care of herself. She knows how to scream her own name. She knows how to handle herself. She can take care of her own sexual needs. And see, now she don't even need a man for that. Look, I know where this is coming from. I do. I know where this is coming from. All right? This is sort of like this pushback in our culture that maybe a lot of women have felt that they are going to be objectified by other people, and they're taking that away from them, and they're going to put it back in their own hands and take care of their needs, and they don't need nobody else to help them. Look, I'm a very independent woman. All right? I really, really am. I'm a pretty independent person. But I'm married, and I want to have a relationship with my husband, and I want to rely on him for a lot of things. And look, sex is one of those things. You should rely on your spouse to meet your sexual needs. And when you are masturbating on your own, away, and you are doing this, and your spouse does not know you're doing this in secret, well, first of all, secrecy is bad in marriage. I don't care if it's got to do with porn or sexual things, or if you're just got a bad spending habit and you're making purchases without letting your spouse know about them because you know, maybe you guys are going over budget, and so you're just sneaking purchases where you shouldn't. Or maybe you guys have agreed to some other things and you're just keeping these things from them because you don't want to deal with their disapproval. No matter how minor or tiny or whatever it is, if you're doing things and you are trying to keep that from your spouse, that's not good. That's bad. Secrecy in marriage is really not good. And secrecy in general is not good. So guys, there's a difference between secrecy and privacy. You know what I mean? So what my husband and I do in our bedroom, it's not a secret. We're not like being secretive to the world. We're being private. I'm not going to share it with the world. I'm not going to tell everybody what's going down. So there's a big difference between secrecy and privacy. Secrecy is having something that you're doing that you feel ashamed of or whatever, and you're keeping it a secret from your spouse. It's not necessarily a privacy thing. So secrecy is bad. And if you are getting off by yourself and using sex toys to masturbate yourself or some other way, and you're not sharing this with your spouse, you're damaging your relationship. And if your spouse is doing that, they are damaging your relationship because that is not relying on your spouse to meet your sexual needs. That is relying on yourself. That is taking this thing God gave us, sex. This is a thing that helps us feel unified with our spouse. This helps us to be one person with our spouse. And we are saying, instead of sex or sexual gratification being something that I do with my spouse and for my spouse, and they do this for me, now it's a selfish act. Because I think solo sex is very selfish. It is saying, you're not meeting my needs, so I'm going to meet my own needs. I'm not going to rely on you to meet my needs. I'm not going to trust you to meet my needs. I'm going to take care of this myself. That's not good in marriage. There are things in our marriage where we should be relying on our spouse to take care of them. So getting off by yourself to masturbate is not a good idea. All right, so it's not healthy for your marriage because, again, you're relying on your spouse you're not relying on your spouse to meet those sexual needs. You're showing them that you don't trust them. You don't trust them to meet your needs, okay? So I know that this is going to bring up a lot of questions. Well, first of all, I've had people question, well, what do I do if we've had sex? And so I hear women say this because, I mean, obviously, men oftentimes will orgasm before a woman. It takes longer to get the woman there, right? And so a woman gets all excited during sex and then she's let down because her spouse has orgasmed and she didn't. And so I've had readers say, well, what do I do if my spouse and I are having sex and he's done but I'm not? Is it okay for me to masturbate so that I can relieve that tension? Well, let's see. It's not okay if you don't tell him. But maybe what is a good idea for you is after you guys are done having sex, you need to say to him, look, I'm really riled up now, buddy. You need to help me. So you guys got to figure out together, all right, how is he going to help you get to orgasm? You have to communicate that to him. So if your spouse gets done having sex with you and he's ready to roll over and go to sleep, but you're really riled up, you just got to tell him, hey, this is something I need from you, so please help me. Going off by yourself to masturbate, again, that's secrecy. That's not relying on your spouse to meet your needs. And it causes you to not work as hard in your marriage for sexual pleasing of one another. It causes you to rely on yourself and not your spouse. It means I'm going to meet my own needs, so I kind of don't need anybody else to meet my needs for me. So I think that what happens in marriage is if you've got one or both spouses who have decided that masturbating is okay, or maybe they haven't decided it's okay, one's doing it in secret, and they're getting off by themselves and they're pleasing themselves, then they don't have the need for the release. So this means there's not as much motivation to come to their spouse and get that release with their spouse. So you're taking away from your relationship. I mean, just the overall relationship. And solo sex is very selfish. It's very self-focused. And there is this running thing that I'm seeing in the culture right now that says You need to put yourself first. I'm going to put my body first. I'm going to put my feelings first. I'm going to put me first and make sure my sexual needs are taken care of. And I don't need you to do that for me because I can handle it myself. All right, that's not what sex is really about, though, is it? Is sex supposed to ever be one-sided? Only one person getting pleasure? Again, I understand where this pushback is happening. I do. I understand why men and women are taking their sexual needs into their own hands, pun intended, right? I understand where that's coming from, but we need to break away from that. You have to explain to your spouse that your sexual needs, be willing to let your spouse meet your sexual needs, and be willing to meet your spouse's sexual needs. But in a perfect relationship, which none of us have, by the way, but in perfect scenarios and perfect relationships, this spouse, the husband, is worried so much about meeting the wife's needs that instead of his own needs, that he's meeting her needs, and she's so worried about meeting her husband's needs that she's meeting his needs, and it's kind of like nobody's needs get left unmet because both are focused on meeting the other person's needs instead of being selfish, right? Well, when we talk about masturbating on our own, solo sex, this is basically all self-focused. All you're there to do is take care of you and no one else. And while I think that we definitely need to put our attention on self-care, I do not put sexual time in the self-care being on my own, okay? I know that is where the culture is taking us, though. That is what is being taught. So just like it's just as important for you to get a shower every day and make sure you're eating healthy, it's just as important to take care of your own sexual needs, meaning masturbating. That is what is the message we're hearing, and that is not healthy for your marriage because it's just putting all that attention on yourself. I think that it causes couples to really struggle to meet one another's sexual needs too, because masturbating, man, it's fast, it's quick, get it in, get it done, but sex takes time. Sex takes communication. It causes you to have to really build your relationship because you have to communicate, you have to work together. It's not just one of you doing the thing you know that's going to feel good. It's communicating to your spouse, when you do this, this feels good to me. So you're really keeping yourself from building more of an emotional bond with your spouse, building more communication with your spouse when you choose to get off by yourself and masturbate. Now, the other question that always comes up is, what about when you and your spouse are separated? So, for example, if you're military and your spouse spends a full year away from you, or 6 months away from you, or whatever, or maybe your spouse just works out of town a lot, should you masturbate in those times? Guys, I don't know if I see anything in the scripture that says you should not ever please yourself without your spouse around, but I'm going to tell you, I don't really necessarily consider it solo sex if a husband and wife are in different locations and are knowing that they are pleasing one another, but it's still together, if that makes sense. So however that communication has to take place for you and your spouse to be sexually intimate, if that can really, I know I'm getting into muddy waters here and maybe sort of like trying to communicate to you that there are ways, if you feel like that is okay, according to your biblical convictions, what you understand the Bible to say and mean in this regard, that if you and your spouse are in different locations and you guys are masturbating in tune with one another, with one another's knowledge, if that's okay with you, then do that. Now, there's a lot of people who really don't think that's healthy for marriage. They don't think that's healthy for the individual. A lot of that is drawn off of past, maybe. So if you have a spouse who has a porn addiction or has been fighting a porn addiction, it might not really be the best idea, even if you guys are separated, for you guys to masturbate, because that might actually feed the addiction that he has or that he has tried to break. All right, that might not be good for you. Maybe your spouse doesn't have that though, and you guys have a understanding, you've worked it out with one another. How will we do this so that we aren't just getting off on our own, taking care of our needs, but that we are working together as a couple to take care of each other's needs? And welcome, my husband.
Hi again.
So how do we do this as a couple? So I encourage you to have that. Angel says hi.
Hi, Angel.
Hi, Angel. So I encourage you to really work through that with your spouse. Again, and this is a message that I keep trying to share with you guys. Do not put yourself into a sexual position that is going to cause you to feel negative. All right? Try to do everything you can to keep the negative sexual times that you have to a minimum. All right? Because you don't want to do things that are going to make you feel dirty or shameful, because that just kind of like makes sex dirty and shameful, and that's not what you want to do. So if your spouse wants to do something and you just cannot get on board with it and it is making you feel bad, then you guys need to abstain from it. All right? That is the number one thing. Always work to have positive sexual time with your spouse. And that is going to require communication. So there are some people who think masturbating away from your spouse is never okay. And for them, guys, it's not okay. Because they've got hang-ups, and that's not good for them, and that would not be good for their marriage, because one or both of them has a problem with that. Now, does that mean that no one can do that? I don't know, because like I said, I don't really see anywhere in the Bible that says that that's wrong, but I know there are some people who feel like the Bible does lean itself that way. You've got to go to God about it. And I always want to encourage you guys to ask yourself, how can I be pleasing and honoring to God with my body in my sex life? And that answer might be very different for everyone. It's not going to be pleasing and honoring to God for you to do something that causes you to feel shameful. But if you don't feel shameful in that, then maybe it is okay. All right? Now, this is not an excuse for you guys to say, well, porn is okay because I don't feel shameful about it. No, we're talking about sex acts with your spouse, okay? We're talking about getting intimate, being with your spouse here. I'm not talking about bringing other people into the bedroom because both of you said it was okay. I'm not talking about bringing porn into your bedroom because both of you guys said it was okay. Or hurting one another because you're both consenting adults. That's not what I'm talking about. All right? So you really have to go to God on this and listen to what He is telling you. I think that for sure when it comes to masturbating, especially when you're on your own and stuff like that, it lends itself to so many other things. A lot of people combine this with porn. And porn is not good. It rewires your brain. It makes you feel anxiety and depression. I mean, those are bad habits. So we know the Bible tells us to keep our minds pure, to refrain from sexual immorality, to think on good things, all right, to fill our minds with things that are wholesome and good. So when you are masturbating, I think a lot of times it lends itself to filling your mind with things that are not wholesome and good, right? That kind of seems to be what happens. It just kind of puts you in that place. So in marriage, if you and your spouse, my friend's husband and her are apart for 18 months. Your friend and her husband, they've got to decide, how are we going to handle this? Some couples are going to say, masturbation is not okay with me. It's not for us. It's not okay with us. Some are going to say, within these parameters, it will be okay for us. But here's my advice to anybody who's living apart from their spouse. You guys have to have a discussion about it. You guys have to build parameters. How are we going to get through this time? What are we going to do? Don't just not have that conversation because it's hard to have. Don't avoid that conversation. Be active. Have it. Say, okay, How are we going to handle our need for sexual release? Are we going to handle it? Are we just going to do like we did in our dating years and abstain? Are we going to come up with ways that we are going to be pleased by one another through that long distance? What does that look like? What is okay? What helps our conscience be clear? Have the conversations. Have them a lot. Keep having those conversations. Work together. Figure out what works and what doesn't. But guys, I encourage you to stay away from solo sex. Don't get off on your own and please yourself and hide it, or even get off on your own and please yourself and tell your spouse if they have the ability to meet your sexual needs. So if you guys are living together, I just really encourage you, masturbation needs to be together. If you're going to masturbate, together, all right, not apart. Rely on one another for sexual intimacy. And with being apart, again, if you guys decide that it's okay that you masturbate, you guys have got to have very real parameters. Big discussions. How will it happen? When can it happen? What's going to happen while it's happening? All right? Is it only going to be when we're on the phone together? Is it only going to be when we're videoing? What kind of situation are you going to be in? What are our parameters? And each couple has to make that decision for themselves. So I always want to come on and get your minds thinking about things so that you will have these discussions, so that you can work through hang-ups, so that you can have these thoughts, and so that you can ultimately have these discussions with your spouse. And I hope you don't come on here and just be like, I'm going to listen to her all day, and that's it. I hope that you walk away and go, I've got to have this conversation now. I've got to really think about this. I've got to brainstorm, how am I going to stay sexually engaged with my spouse if they're away from me? How am I going to stay sexually engaged with my spouse if they're with me? And actually put those things into practice and get thinking about it. So, guys, thanks so much for joining me today. And if you'd like to see what I've been blogging about, go to lovehopeadventure.com and check that out. And if you want to get this game early, my latest bedroom game, get on my spicy newsletter list, lovehopeadventure.com/newsletter, and you will be added to that list, and I will send it to you. Thank you so much for joining me today, and I will talk with you guys tomorrow. And as always, if you have questions, send me a note, keely@lovehopeadventure.com, and I will be glad to message you and give you resources if you're looking for some. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.